Coming up on this episode of Embracing Change with Lucretia Bowman and Jennifer Osborn.
So I had to believe that if I take that same energy and take that same grit and take that same tenacity and put it over here, that I could get a different outcome.
All right, welcome back. We are jumping into section 2 of Lucretia's book, Breaking the Cycle of Self-Abuse. And this week we're going to be talking about chapter 11 more specifically. If you've read this book, you would be aware of the fact that there are 10 steps that she goes over in this chapter. And I think this is really great. So you open up this chapter with technical change and adaptive change.
What are the difference?
Yeah.
Well, I believe that technical change is you deal deeper into why you do something, where adaptive, you can just kind of like a chameleon. You can just kind of adapt to the environment and just, change for that moment. And so I believe when it comes to, it's just like technology, it has its own brain and you've got to, the wiring has got to be right? Mm-hmm. And for it to be able to operate in the way versus adaptive, I can take something and just push something and I can adapt to it and move. And I've seen myself throughout life adapt to something, like I want to change, I want to do something. So for a minute, because it pleases somebody else, I adapt to it. But then soon as pain comes back or something happens, I easily go back to what was easier or more comfortable. Unlike if it was technical, it's wired in me to know you do not go back to that. This is not where I want to go. And I believe that is what I've been on a journey of, is being intentional. Technical is being intentional about the change, not just adapting to it or just changing because it pleases somebody else or just not to go to prison. And I'm going to be honest, in the beginning, that probably was my intent. But then it became a whole different perspective and mindset on why the change was necessary. I started believing in the opportunities and the new way versus saying, I'm just going to do this until something else come up, or I talk my way out of it. No, I really talked my way out of or into. And so I began to talk myself into wanting to be wired different, asking God to go inside and really wire me in a technical way different than I was.
Is that how you came up with this 10-step model of adaptive change, which it says you're using it in the recovery program? Is that how you kind of started looking at the process of change?
Exactly. Looking at the process, looking at, adaptive versus technical, looking at the 10 steps comes from, it's really an NA, they have a 12-step program. I just kind of looked at different ways of how I operated. Like I realized that, my first step had to be, I had to surrender my own foolishness. I had to surrender my own thinking. I had to come to the end of myself. I was fine with the life I had. I've been thinking about this lately, about decades, because we're in a new decade. And so my first 3 decades were my first 30 years, and they were a total wreck, full of pain, full of disappointment, me having lies, being told lies, becoming a liar, being stealing from other people, loss of my identity, willing to try anything, going to prison and finding comfort in the incarceration more than the freedom, because incarceration I didn't have to be responsible. People told me what to do, learning, so that first decade of my life, and now I'm on the second half of I'm on the second half of my 3 decades. And I've been in this process now for about 28 years. So I'll be 60 if I live long enough in September the 12th of this year to 2020. Then I feel like that I would have had 2 decades of 3s. Really 6, 10, 6, which would be 60. And the Bible talks about 70 and 10. So that's 60 plus 10 is the promises of God. for you to live.
That's good.
And so for me, I'm learning and being present enough to know I'm reaching my promise that God gave me, which is the 70, and then praying for the 10 years of grace, if that makes sense. And of course, I'd like to live longer, but I definitely would love to get to being 70 so I can see my grandson graduate from high school and those kind of things. And so only he knows my day that I was going to be born and the day I was going to leave. But those 10 steps they come out of me being an NA and AA, and then taking those same steps and looking at my life through the perspective of a spiritual journey.
Really digging in a lot deeper.
Exactly.
So digging into those steps, your first step, you kind of alluded to it, but step 1, after trying all you know to do, come to the end of yourself and surrender to God. So speak to that a little bit. Someone who's struggling with surrender, or even how you approach surrender.
Well, I think that the way I have learned to approach it throughout this last, 28 years is realizing that if it comes from me, it probably isn't going to work. Or if I think of my best thinking got me my worst outcome. And so surrendering to another decision, seeking counsel, asking other people, running it past them, what do you think? Because like I said, my best thinking got me the worst outcome. And constantly surrendering. And I always talk about, I think in my book, I talk about surrendering is not giving up or giving in. It's just being willing to look at things different. And I think so often, like submission, we look at submission as almost a curse word, like surrender. And most of us who are in situations like myself, like I was, that's not something that we do easily, is to turn the white flag. We don't raise the right flag. We fight, claw it to the end. And just learning throughout this process, I don't want anyone to think that I just arrived at surrender, because I'm still learning to surrender 28 years later to patterns and thoughts of behaviors and reaction versus responses, and being vulnerable versus being tough. And Brene Brown says it well, learning to de-armor, like taking my armor off and my protection code, and just constantly being present enough and aware enough that when something hits me and trigger me, what's going on? Do I need to stop and drop right here? Because if I don't, I know I pick my sword up and I'll start fighting again.
So what clues you into that you are not surrendering? Like, how are you self-aware enough to know, I'm not really surrendering this particular issue?
Because honestly, I think we all know it. There's a still small voice in us, and there's a gut feeling that we all have. When something hits us, some of us get hit in the head in our thinking. Some of us get hit in the gut, like it's our body. Some of us get hit in our jaw, like somebody just took our heads off. I think when you're being, and you're not, and then you start replaying the tape, or you start having these emotional feelings, and you start, it's some language in your body that has become a pattern. Even, as a child, when you probably was in your mother's womb, and how your mother treated you, spoke to you while you were there, and then when you came into the wound, and I always talk about the head comes out first, because it's the most important thing. If that's the case, why would they say breech baby if it's coming to the feet? The feet is important too, but the feet only is important because of the mind, and the head tells the feet where to go. And so I think that I know that at times, because for me, I feel it in my body. I get this body feeling, like I get, and it's like I know, like in that moment, like I'm not surrendering, like, oh, okay, I need to step back, pause, take a breath. Why am I feeling? And asking myself, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this? And where did it come from?
It's good to step back and ask those questions.
Mm-hmm. It's pause, it's breathe.
Yeah.
Really. It's a new way of thinking, a new way of perceiving. I've not always been that way. I think because I immediately always thought I was right. So I didn't need to pause for something, because why pause when you think you're right all the time? Well, and then I needed to be right because I had lived such a wrong life, and I felt so wronged by others. And, people had taken advantage of me, and the word I'm looking for is violated me in such ways that I was going to fight you to the end, because I was going to be right even if I was wrong. I was going to argue you to the end. I was going to, if you think you got me, you may think you won, but I'm going to show you at the end, I'm coming. You ain't going to see me coming. And that was just my mindset. And so disassembling those things in me is not something I've done. It's something I've allowed to be done because I've been present. And you ask, how do you know? Because I just know. It's like I know that side of me so well. I lived with it for 30 years, 32 to be exact. And so I know her. And I know when she shows up. And I know that she shows up because she wants to protect me, because she's been used to having that position. And to show her that I love her, that part of me, and that I thank her for helping me get through all those traumatic experiences. I'm grateful, but I don't need you to protect me, and I don't need you to defend me. I need us to be educated so we can articulate our journey in a new way. So, and I think that's a constant surrender.
It's learning how to be safe too.
Yeah.
Is what I hear in that before it wasn't necessarily, surrender didn't feel like a safe thing to do.
Exactly.
So your confidence was your shield, and it was that.
My armor. It was
I'm not going to surrender.
Nothing. You're never going to win with me. And even if you think you win and you ain't, that's how I used to think. Like, I got you over here. I got that eye on you.
Yeah. Well, then that's a tough thing to do, and I'm glad it's step one, because that's learning how to be safe with the Father, with the things in your life. But it's super hard to really get to really surrendering.
Yeah, and being safe with other people. God, life and this journey has put, some people, and I don't want to offend people as I'm doing this, but I believe in Jesus, and you may not believe in him, and that's fine, but it doesn't mean the principles won't work. I think a lot of people who still don't believe in Christ, because when he died for everyone. Now, he knew that you wouldn't necessarily believe in him. You may call him Buddha, Ali, you might call him whatever you call him, or call it that's bigger than you. Notice I said surrender to something bigger than you. So whatever it is, you've got to figure out. I believe in Jesus, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That's my spiritual journey. Someone else may have another one, and that's between you and God in the end. I'm not here to be the judge of that. I just know what works for me. Does that make sense? And that is who I believe in. And I don't have to defend him. I don't have to justify him. I just know he is, and he's been faithful for my life. And when I look back at my spiritual journey, he has been there even before I believed in him. He was there. I only survived the life I survived because he was there protecting me. So, but I still had to do some natural and emotional and spiritual work.
That leads into step two, because I think you have to get through step one in the surrender to get to step two, which is accept the fact that through God you could be restored to wholeness.
Exactly. And I had to believe that once I got to the place, as you've heard, if you've been listening to these podcasts and you've read my book, the journey I went through, but it got to a point where I had to start truly believing that being out of prison was more than I wanted. And then getting connected with the counselor to send me go to church and these different things. I don't think they were all coincidence. I think they were God ordained, and I was catching up with what God had already planned for me. I lagged along a little longer than he anticipated. So I feel like it was a radical moment in my life, and if that makes sense. And it was radical, and it felt like it was happening really fast, and it was, but I also know that your gifts come without repentance. I'm very gifted. I'm very intelligent. I'm able to articulate, and I'm able to maneuver as well as manipulate. So I'm not perfect. So I have to be very careful with the influences that I have and the gifts that I have. So I use the same gifts now, 28 years in the process of change, as I did over there 32 years in the process of destruction. So I had to believe that if I take that same energy and take that same grit and take that same tenacity and put it over here, that I could get a different outcome. And that I could, those holes in my heart and life and mind and perception and vision could change. And I could be whole again. I was already free. See, I was already free. I was born free. It was just my experiences that bound me, that made me not believe that freedom was a possibility for me. So I had to believe again that I was already free, and I had to go and unwind myself through the realities and the truths and replace the lies for the truth. I had to do that work through many avenues, through many processes, through counseling, through catechism classes, through NAA, through mentors and sponsors, through sitting myself down and having conversations with myself and saying to me, come on, ain't we tired? Ain't we tired? You keep hitting your head against that wall and the wall ain't moving. You the one end up on the ground every time. Ain't you tired? Yeah, so I had to start believing I could be free again. Realize that I was already free and I needed to do the work to make the freedom show up. And I'm still doing the work to make the freedom show up.
And that leads into, I don't mean to be like so into the steps, but it's just such a nice progression.
Right, and it's not really steps, it's as you said it's a process. One thing that happens, it's like I did a teaching not too long ago about the GPS, and so God's protective systems, that's what they are. These steps are God's protective systems. They're his principles, God's principles of how he systematically, strategically gets us to a place. And if we work them, see, the thing about principles, if you practice them, they become disciplines. And if they're disciplines, they become habits. And if they become habits, they become a way of life. Yeah. And you do them long enough, they become your character. You can change.
That is so important for people to hear. They can change. Because I think too often people have been led to believe that they can't change.
And there's a lot of systems of this world that tells people they never will change.
Right.
So they've heard that you will always be the same. Yeah. So then why try?
Right.
I've been told that too. So
you want to throw up your hands and say, I give up. I give up.
And so you start committing suicide. That's why the book is called Breaking the Cycle of Self-Abuse. It's really, is another saying, breaking the cycle of suicide, because you begin to kill yourself without even knowing it.
So true. So true.
Yeah.
Step 3, turn your life over to God and walk through the process. You talk about microwave healing. Mm-hmm. Have you experienced that from a lot of people that you've even counseled with?
Oh, definitely. Over the 28 years, microwave healing is just let me stay in here long enough, like microwave popcorn, to get as popped as I want to, but then not finish the complete process. Exactly. I just want just enough to take the sting off the pain, but not really deal with the core of the pain. And most of the people who come into this recovery process, if we're not careful, that's what we become.
That's not good.
And I did it for many years. That's why I end up in prison 5 times.
I mean, you already said it once. Change is hard, and it's a process, but it's really worth it if you work it and do it and not look for the easy change, because then it's not really change. It's
adaptive change, or you can, it's almost like changing clothes. You might change clothes, but you're still the same person.
Yeah. That's a good
you may
point.
take a shower, but if you ain't changed from the internal self, you're still that same person. You just got different clothes on and you clean up. That's all.
Yeah.
If you don't deal with the core issues of your heart, trust me, and I'm learning that, and I'm still in the process 28 years later. I tell people, like I said, I'm 59 years old, and yet there are days I feel like I'm just turning 35, because I feel like the restoration has been given to me in a new way, that I'm making choices and decisions that most 35-year-olds make. I'm looking at my life through those lenses, because God didn't come get a 32-year-old girl. He did get a 32-year-old woman, because I was already chronologically 32. But he came after a 5-year-old little girl that was living in a 32-year-old body.
Yeah.
And so he's raised her up for 28 years.
And
so that makes her about 33.
And I want to really point out for folks who are listening is that because change is a process, you have moments where you will take a step back, but that doesn't mean that you've lost progress. It just means you've got a moment.
It's a pause, a moment. And then sometimes you just
forward.
still sit still and absorb the moment you're in, meaning, and it could take 2 or 3 years that you just absorb all the new information. It goes back to technical change, and so you can be rewired and really practice it and do it and fall and get back up and all those things, but you still stay in the process.
Right.
And when I say fall, some people, I just need you to know, some of you guys will maybe relapse with drugs or sex or shopping, or mine was my way of thinking, control, being insecure, needing to be right all the time. So I would always have, not always, a lot of my process, I relapsed in my thinking. And I kind of, would go back to what was comfortable, and if it worked, and what was familiar.
Yeah.
And so I built a whole ministry. And I was talking to someone today. God met a girl, or I was introduced to him myself, and I was not prepared to do ministry in the way that he graced me, but he gave me space, and he put something in my hand and my heart, and I know now it's this love for me to keep me in, and I was toe up to the flow up, and yet this ministry taught me I could not give someone what I did not have. So it was almost like a relationship that the Lord just gave me this vision of having the courage to change. And he said, you're going to have the courage to change. You're going to go back with me, and I'm going to show you. But he was not just taking me. He was introducing other people to me to help, but he was also introducing me to me through those people. And so we were all on this journey and process. And it's just been amazing to sit back and look at it now and say, wow, God, you truly did trust yourself, because I was toe up that I would even be here 20-something years later in the same process. Because when I got the ministry, I was 3 years clean, 3 years out of prison. So you're talking 25 years of this process of ministry, and so simultaneously me growing and me working towards a bigger goal for someone else, all at the same time. I'm not really sure how he did that and why he did that, but he did, and it worked for my life. It don't always work for everybody else's, but it worked for mine, and it's been amazing to see the outcome. And now going from 5 women in my own home with my husband to being able to serve 36 women, 48 women, 48 men, families. It's just been amazing for him to take that and do that, and I'm just amazed.
It reminds me of someone had said in a different interview that I had done that they get the answers in the moment that they can actually receive them, and that the answer doesn't change, but they understand it more fully as they grow. And so I'm reminded of, you started with 5 women and kind of a smaller part, and it grew as you grew. And
not only that, I even need to go back as far as this weekend. I was thinking, and I was weeping again, and the Lord said, I never have changed my mind. When I spoke to you in prison and said you would never have definition of meaning till you come back to the source, I haven't changed my mind. All this time, I've been bringing you back to me. I am the source, Lucretia. You and me. I am the source. So I didn't change my mind. From the day I woke you up in that bed in prison and spoke those words to you, you saw that little girl. You had that vision and things began to come together. I didn't change my mind. I didn't. It may have looked like it, but I didn't. I am still the source, Lucretia. And until you know it, like you breathing. And that's what I've been showing you. And that's been amazing to know that on a different, as you just said, on a different scale, a different level after these many years, that he hasn't changed his mind. His promises are yea and amen. You know.
He's just revealing more of it, more fully. The answer is still the same.
Yeah.
It's just you can hear or perceive
Yeah.
the bigger answer in the bigger way,
Yeah.
in which he is the source.
He is the source.
The beginning. He is your first. He's
His
your foundation.
He's it. Nothing
Yeah.
else. I'm not changing. Like, I didn't change my mind.
Right.
And if you don't come to me, you'll never know who you are. Because I
Amen.
created you. You'll never know. You can find pieces of yourself, or find delusional pieces throughout your walk if you want to, and that's fine. And I'll wait on you. But eventually, you'll say uncle again. You'll say I give again and again and again and again.
And he remains.
And he remains in the same, I'm the source.
Yeah. All right, well, we will end it right at that point. Till next time, guys.
You've been listening to the Embracing Change podcast. Music production and mastering by Gone Coastal Productions. Podcast editing and production by Jennifer Osborn. Podcast copyright 2020 by Lucretia Bowman.